Hello and welcome, Foothills Weather Network family. We are here again. Another winter is upon us, Daniel, and we are ready to bestow upon you what we think the winter of 2023-24 is going to look like.
Chris, it's hard to believe you say 23, 24. Time just flies, don't it?
I mean, it seems like we were just here not that long ago. Big shout out to our sponsor, Paloma Mexican restaurant there in Morganton, down below Freedom High School. Go by, see them, say hello, tell them Foothills Action Network sent you, and they may give you a little something special.
They might. They have some good food. So
they do.
When you're in the Morganton area, make sure to visit our folks at Paloma. But now it's time to talk about what everybody wants to know. What is the winter going to be like across the foothills in western Piedmont of North Carolina? And we're here to kind of give you our best guess. There's a lot of things going on, Chris.
A lot of things going on.
Yes,
here.
there is.
Sure is. So let's jump right into it. Okay. So the first takeaway here, moderate El Nino is taking over across the western hemisphere. Daniel, what does that mean?
Well, that means the warming of the waters in the equatorial Pacific. Folks who follow weather probably hear a lot about El Nino and La Nina. But all the indications are that El Nino has taken over. However, Chris, if you look at the weather pattern we've had this fall, it's not very reminiscent of an El Nino. Is there a little bit of a delay in the reaction in the atmosphere? That's something we've got to wonder about.
Yeah, there seems to be some sort of inhibition to the train of storms that's coming across. Something has to be going on there in the Pacific out near Hawaii that is creating a block for that moisture to get transported up into our region. So
yeah, anywhere between Hawaii and, say, the coast of South America, in that area, there's something going on it's not really linking up right now like you would expect. Because a lot of times in an El Nino, especially a moderate El Nino, we start to see those reverses in October and November. And if you've been following our weather locally, it's been very dry.
Has been very dry. And really, the models keep hinting and keep tricking us into believing that, a week out from today's date, the model that it's going to change a little bit. But then you start to get closer and closer and closer to those scenarios, and the moisture seems to taper off and trend further south and then further out into the Atlantic and over Cuba and the Caribbean.
Yeah, and that's something that, is that going to be a trend through the whole winter? We'll kind of find out as we get through. But also, high latitude blocking allowed cold air to be pushed southward away from the polar regions into North America. We talk about that a lot. We talk about stuff like the Greenland block, the North Atlantic Oscillation being in a negative phase. That blocking forces things to the south. We're actually seeing that right now. We're recording this on the 26th of November, and we have a pretty chilly air mass coming in our current forecast.
We do.
That's kind of an indicator of some blocking going on. Now, will the Pacific and the Pacific North American Ridge, the positive PNA, will that try to play a significant role in the pattern this winter? I know a lot of talk when you listen to meteorologists on Twitter or whatever your favorite social media outlet is, it's about NAO a lot of times. But the PNA for us here in the Southeast could be the most important teleconnection. When it's positive, that means that the west coast of North America sees the ridge, and then it pushes the cold air south into the eastern part of North America.
That's right. And it also helps with the storm track. Those storm systems, getting that ridge to set up right where it dives down into Texas and into the Gulf of Mexico instead of shooting straight across the country in a zonal flow.
Yeah. When we get that PNA positive, it really helps the Southeast particularly. And then the last thing you talked about, the MJO, is another thing we look at. Really, MJO is kind of a phase globally to where there's more natural lift and stuff going on in the atmosphere. When you get into phases 8, 1, 2, and 3, which we have on this slide, those are supportive for active weather across the U.S., especially the eastern U.S. There's indications that we may see more of that this year. But, last year, not only was it so warm with the La Nina winter, but those MJO phases were just terrible. We wasn't getting much of anything.
That's right. They sure were. So what are we talking about, the MJO? It's a Madden-Julian oscillation. And we're talking about where the thunderstorms are placed over the Indian Ocean. getting into 8, 1, 2, and 3 is much more favorable for us because it links the moisture into the teleconnections. So that's how they all tie together.
Yeah, when we talk about weather and how it's a global thing and how something in one part of the world affects another part of the world, that's a great example, the MJO.
Absolutely, it is.
So let's go and let's look at our next slide. And this is kind of the primary jet stream pattern that we think is going to occur this winter. And we've seen it a lot the last few winters. The blue line is the northern jet that generally comes across the Pacific and goes across the middle of the country. As you can see, the northern jet is going to cut right through the middle of the country and then go up toward the mid-Atlantic and northeast coast. Now, there will be some cooler air involved with that, but also the storm track is just to our north to where a lot of times we're not going to be on the cool side of things. So we may have some rain events. Also, looking at that red line that's cut across Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico, and Florida, that's kind of that indication of what the El Nino impacts will be. That's more of a southern jet, more clouds, a little bit more moisture. And we think with the primary jet pattern, it's going to lie across that area to our south. Now, it can bring us clouds. Yep. It may not particularly bring us moisture.
And you're seeing that a lot. That's going on right now. A lot of clouds, but a lot of very quick-moving systems that are moving across this area, and we get zero rain from it. Maybe a sprinkle or two.
Yeah, not much with the primary pattern, and that's something we think will happen quite a bit this winter. But also the secondary jet, and you can see how the northern jet, that blue line, it digs from the Pacific Northwest down through the Rockies, down into Texas, and it goes into the southeast. That is a more indicative pattern of the positive PNA. There could be some of the Greenland blocking that's allowing that. And then also you see with the red line, your continued southern jet, what happens is those two features, the northern jet and the southern jet, gets a little bit closer. And that's when things get a little bit more interesting for winter weather around here.
Yeah, if you're a winter weather lover, we need that Gulf of Mexico moisture. The moisture that comes off the Great Lakes is great for the mountains and the ski slope areas, but it doesn't help us here on the east side of the mountains. We need a lot of moisture coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, and we need those two jet streams to come together in what we call phase together to become one and produce a significant storm on the East Coast. Can that happen? It may. And, we're seeing signs of that in the long-term models already where we've got some sort of block going on over Greenland, and we're starting to see that cold air plummet into the eastern part of the country. But the problem is that PNA is not wanting to play along right now.
Yeah, the PNA is remaining neutral to negative. When that happens, things are continuing to push to the east. So it's not allowing that ridge to set up and maybe hold for a couple of days.
Yeah, everything's very progressive. It's fast-moving systems, very quick. They move across, they're out of here. And like we were saying a second ago, a lot of clouds and a lot of moisture to the south, but not a lot up in our area.
So let's look at some of the forecasts that we have. First off, this temperature forecast. And you can really see, I think for the bulk of western North Carolina, we're going to have temperatures pretty close to normal this year. Now, does that mean we're going to be cold for 3 months? No. But what's going to happen, I believe, and Chris, you will probably agree with this as well, we're going to have some times where it does warm up, but we're going to also have times, like we mentioned, where it's cloudy for a few days at a time, and it keeps the temperature down. And I really think over the course of the winter, we're going to keep temperatures at normal. That's in the gray. Now, you can look just to the south, across South Carolina, below normal. Why is it like that? The clouds, they may also get a little bit more moisture. You can also see a little bit there along the Tennessee-North Carolina line, the high country. Those temperatures could be slightly below normal as well. When you get into the Tennessee Valley and up in the Ohio Valley, sometimes you kind of get out of the moisture, and even though it might be cool, you're also having warm spells. So we think and technically we don't cover, Tennessee or anything, but
Yeah.
you get away from our region, there's going to be to the north and west probably some at or just above normal temperatures.
Absolutely. I think that's right on, Daniel, with the Northeast probably seeing a very mild winter there over to Ohio and then down into Tennessee and Kentucky, just because of what you said, the moisture. Think about it, we're getting the northern fringe of the clouds here. Well, they're not getting the clouds there, and they're seeing more sunshine up across their areas. That also will play a role into those areas going into more of a drought come spring.
Yeah, definitely. The next slide we want to show you is our precipitation forecast. And the biggest takeaway from this, we talked about the temperatures, the areas that were going to be cooler than normal, is a result of having some more moisture. So as you can see, down in the very southeast part of this map, when you get down into parts of upstate South Carolina, Charlotte, maybe just east of Charlotte, could be some more moisture generally hanging around. And for us, we're going to be closer to average. Now, here's the weird thing, Chris. We've been so dry this fall, it's going to seem like it might be quite a bit going on, but we're only going to be close to average.
Yeah, and it's going to take a lot to pull us out of this drought. So over the 3-month meteorological winter that we're forecasting for here, which is December, January, and February, we don't see a lot of overcoming here with the drought. Even with the El Nino in place, a lot of that stuff getting shunted, the precipitation getting shunted off to the south. I think that it could happen. Should we see near average precipitation, we will maintain where we're at, but we're not going to make up that drought in 2 or 3
the
months.
The only thing, Chris, that probably would help us is due to the fact that this winter time, there's not as much sun to dry out the soil.
That's right.
We can maybe make a little ground on it, but we're not going to wipe it out in 3 months. And if there's one part of the forecast I hope we bust on, being too low, I hope it's on precipitation.
Absolutely. I hope it is too. But it just doesn't look like a ton of moisture is going to get up in here, Dan. That a lot of that's going to be shunted off to the south. So it's a wait and see game. That's our best guess right now, our hypothesis on what is going to happen precipitation wise. And Dan, that leads us over to the big slide, the one that everybody's waiting to see, right?
Oh yeah, here we go. Now, you look at this map, Chris, and people want to say, well, why are you predicting above average snowfall?
No.
Well, here's the first thing you got to realize about Western North Carolina. Normally, one storm can get your winter average most of the times around here.
Absolutely.
So while I don't see us, and you don't see us having like repeated storms and a lot of moisture, you got to believe we're going to have better luck than we had last year. Yeah. It was horrible last year.
Horrible.
If you were a snow lover, you had nothing. We had that really bad cold snap at Christmas, and that was the highlight of our winter.
It was.
So I think what's going to happen is when you're across the foothills, and you can kind of see some areas we have marked there along Mount Mitchell, along the eastern slopes there, east of the French Broad River Valley, and then up to the high country, I think there's chances that you can go above average. Now, you also got to remember averages for Marion, Morganton, Lenore is like 6 or so inches. So, if you're 120% and your average is 6 inches, you're only saying, well, you're getting another inch or two extra. Yeah. So, kind of put that in mind. You can also see the valleys in the northern mountains, places like Burnsville and Spruce Pine. We have them near average, but their averages are generally higher. So It's all kind of even out itself, I think, with the snow this year. It wouldn't at all surprise me that if you look at Western North Carolina as a whole, when the winter's over, you may see as much snow in the foothills as you see in the mountains.
I think you're right, Daniel. I think that, we've highlighted this well with below average snow off to the south, because with those clouds and more precipitation, they'll act as a blanket and they'll keep the temperatures up at nighttime too. So even up along the night north of I-40, above average snowfall, it only takes 1/10 of an inch of liquid, generally speaking, to produce 1 inch of snowfall here. So we get 1/10 of an inch of rain, and we've got 1 inch of snow on the ground.
Yeah.
And when you only are averaging 6 inches of snow a year, it doesn't take a lot to overcome that average.
Yeah, it does. And let's show some this is kind of our bold predictions on numbers this year. The numbers to the left are your seasonal averages for our coverage area in Western North Carolina, and people will never know it. For some weird, oddball reason, Hickory has the highest average.
They do.
And we have studied that for years, but the Hickory Regional Airport has the highest average of any of our coverage area.
They sure do. That area, that little corridor right there along and just west of Highway 16, going up through Catawba County and into southeastern Caldwell and Alexander County. There's a little bullseye there. I think it has to do with some of the lift of that moisture coming from the south, riding up and over the South Mountains and kind of getting displaced just to the north of them there. Well, we've got the South Mountains to our south too, but they're not as pronounced, and it takes a little bit to get that energy flowing. So I think those South Mountains definitely play a role into Hickory's seasonal average.
Yeah, and as this is where it is, they have the highest average. But you can see the numbers on the left. Generally, the averages are between 6.5 and 7 inches across Interstate 40. Just a little bit less there in Taylorsville, and then when you drop down toward Highway 74, those numbers go down. So our bold predictions there on the right are just above average for the areas we talked about. Hickory and Morganton, we feel like you could get 7.5 inches of snow this year. 7 in Marion, about 6.5 in Lenore, and then as we work south, at or just below average for places like Rutherford and Shelby.
That's right, Dan. And again, it only takes one storm, and you're able to pull that cold air from the north down if that low develops just right. And you can overcome these totals pretty quickly in a good event, especially in the El Nino year, where we've got more moisture in the atmosphere. We just hope a lot of it gets pulled further north and is not as shunted as far south. So, Shelby looks at it and they're like, 3 inches. Well, that's nothing. Well, for Shelby, your average is only 3.6 inches, and you're just a little bit below normal there. Whereas you go to the mountains, you're talking about Spruce Pine and some of those mountain valley areas up in there, where the average snowfall for those areas is something on the order of 20 to 30 inches of snow a year.
Yeah.
We're expecting them to be right there at average. Yeah. So, it's all relevant to where your location is as to what we're talking about with snowfall projections.
So that is a look at our winter outlook. Again, we'll kind of recap about some things that we see happening. Number one, we're going to have the El Nino we've talked about. Generally, temperatures at or maybe just a hair below normal across the region. More precip chances, especially compared to what we've seen earlier this year. And can we get one or two of those really link up to bring some snow? We think the chances are definitely better than we had last year. But, I've seen some people on social media just take the El Nino and say, we're going to have a massive winter in the east.
Yeah.
We're not that bullish on that, to be quite honest. But we feel like chances are a little bit better than what we've seen last year.
Last year we had some cold air, and we would have the cold snaps and then moisture when the warm air moved back in. So this year, getting the two to link up, we think there is a better chance of that going forward. And we're starting to see that in the models already, just a little bit going into late December, looking out a month in advance, where there's more of a moisture flow into the area. But again, all of that's relevant because once we get a week out or so in those same models, the moisture starts to get pushed further and further south, and then we end up with not a lot of moisture in our area.
Yeah, and that's something we'll have to keep an eye on as we head in through the winter, which, like you said, meteorological winter actually starts this coming Friday, December 1st. So it's going to be interesting, Chris.
It will be. So you got to stick around and enjoy it. And then when it's snowing, you got to go eat with our friends at Mi Paloma Mexican Restaurant down below Freedom High School on Independence Boulevard. Folks are great, wonderful family there that services the area with very good food. I'm telling you, that food's hard to beat. You can get Mexican food at a lot of restaurants. You'll be hard-pressed to beat the service and the taste there at Mi Paloma Mexican Restaurant.
Yeah, great folks, and I'm glad they've supported us. Is this the third or fourth year they've done the winter outlook for us?
Third year for us.
So,
Yeah.
kudos to them for their support of Foothills Action Network. So that is a look at the winter forecast. We're going to keep an eye on things, and as always, when the first threat of winter weather looks to be coming to our region, stick with us. We'll keep you updated on that. As always, check out our social media pages. Check out our website, foothillsweather.net. And also, if you have not yet, download our app. Just type in Foothills Weather in your app store and download that app for free.
Have a great afternoon, and let's go winter.
Yeah.